Case 1. Cassie Smith and Joshua Oxford. September 1st, 2018, Clark County, Las Vegas. Cassie Smith walked into the North Las Vegas Police Department on the morning of September 3rd, 2018, and told officers that her 3-year-old son had vanished from Sunset Park while she had been distracted by her phone. She was calm. She was composed. And she was lying. What investigators would uncover in the days that followed would shake the Las Vegas Valley to its foundation, not simply because of what had happened to little Daniel Terrio, but because of how long it had been happening, how many people had been close enough to see it, and how a child so young and so defenseless had been failed at every turn by the very people who were supposed to protect him. Daniel Terrio was 3 years old. He had a toddler's laugh, a toddler's curiosity, and a toddler's complete and total dependence on the adults in his world. He lived with his mother, Cassie Smith, and her boyfriend, Joshua Oxford, in an apartment in the Las Vegas area. To the outside world, the household may have appeared unremarkable, one of thousands of working-class homes tucked into the sprawling neighborhoods of Clark County. But behind closed doors, Daniel's world was one of ongoing suffering that no child should ever have to endure. Investigators later determined that Daniel had been subjected to prolonged physical abuse inside the couple's apartment. The injuries documented by medical examiners told a story that no parent should ever be responsible for writing. This was not a single incident. This was not a momentary lapse in judgment or a tragedy born of neglect in one careless afternoon. This was a pattern, a sustained, deliberate pattern of harm inflicted on a child who weighed less than 40 pounds and who had no means of escape, no voice loud enough to be heard beyond those walls, and no one coming to his rescue. On September 1st, 2018, Daniel Terrio lost his life inside that apartment. He was 3 years old. What happened next reveals something deeply troubling about the human capacity for deception. Rather than contacting emergency services, rather than calling for help, Cassie Smith and Joshua Oxford made a decision. They chose concealment over accountability. They chose self-preservation over their child. Daniel's body was transported from the apartment and hidden in a remote location near the Lake Mead National Recreation Area, one of the most vast and rugged stretches of desert terrain in all of southern Nevada. The area spans more than 1.5 million acres of land. It was chosen, investigators believe, because it offered the possibility that Daniel would simply never be found. For 2 days, Cassie Smith said nothing. Then, on September 3rd, 2018, she walked into the police station and reported her son missing. She told officers she had taken Daniel to Sunset Park, a well-known public park in Las Vegas, and that while she had been looking at her phone, he had disappeared. She described a frantic search. She described her panic. She described a mother devastated by the disappearance of her child. None of it was true. Law enforcement began what appeared to be a missing child investigation. In Las Vegas, missing child reports are taken with absolute seriousness. Search teams were mobilized. The public was alerted. And investigators began the careful, methodical process of examining every detail of Cassie Smith's account. Because in cases involving young children, law enforcement is trained to look beyond the surface of what a parent tells them. It did not take long for inconsistencies to emerge. Surveillance footage, witness accounts, and the forensic examination of the apartment where Daniel had been living all began to tell a very different story than the one Smith had presented. The apartment itself became a significant piece of evidence. What investigators found inside those walls confirmed what the medical examiner's findings would later support, that Daniel had suffered harm over an extended period of time, and that the home he had lived in was not a safe environment for any child. As the investigation intensified, the pressure on Cassie Smith became insurmountable. The story she had constructed began to collapse under the weight of evidence. Eventually, Smith led investigators to Daniel's body. He was found in a remote area near the Lake Mead National Recreation Area, exactly as far from the eyes of the public as those who hid him had intended. The community of Las Vegas responded with grief, with outrage, and with a demand for justice that would carry through the courtroom proceedings that followed. Joshua Oxford was the first to face sentencing. In November of 2019, Oxford stood before a Clark County judge and received a sentence of 16 to 45 years in state prison. He would not be walking out of that courtroom a free man. He would not return to the life he had known. The sentence reflected the gravity of what had occurred, a child's life taken, a body concealed, a community deceived. Cassie Smith faced her own reckoning on February 19, 2020. In a Clark County courtroom, the woman who had walked into a police station and described herself as a grieving, searching mother was sentenced to 14 to 45 years in Nevada State Prison. The judge's words that day carried the full weight of the justice system, not as an abstract institution, but as the final voice speaking on behalf of a little boy who could no longer speak for himself. Daniel Terrio was 3 years old. He deserved a childhood. He deserved laughter and scraped knees and the ordinary, unremarkable joy of growing up. He deserved to be protected by the people entrusted with his care. He deserved better than what he received. His story now lives in the court records of Clark County, Nevada, a permanent, documented reminder that the justice system, however imperfect, did not look away. Two individuals who chose concealment over compassion now serve lengthy prison sentences. And the name Daniel Terrio is spoken not in silence, but in the ongoing conversation about child welfare, about the warning signs that communities must be trained to recognize, and about the responsibility that every adult carries when a child's safety is at risk. If you are concerned about the welfare of a child in your community, the Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, at 1-800-422-4453. You do not have to be certain. You only have to be willing to make the call. Daniel's story is not just a legal case. It is a call to every person watching this, to pay attention, to speak up, and to remember that the most vulnerable among us depend entirely on the willingness of adults to act when something is wrong. Justice, in this case, was served. But justice cannot undo what was done. It can only ensure that a child's suffering was not forgotten, and that those responsible were held accountable before the full authority of the law. If this case moved you, if it reminded you why stories like Daniel's must be told, please take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe to Cold Case Hour. Every subscription helps this channel continue bringing these important stories to light. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. These cases deserve to be heard, and your support makes that possible. Case 2, Kemaya Taylor. June 28, 2021, Clark County, Las Vegas. There is a word that appears in the official court record of this case. A word spoken not by a prosecutor, not by a detective, not by a medical examiner, but by the defendant herself. That word is sacrifice. And it is the word that, perhaps more than any piece of physical evidence, any forensic finding, or any legal argument, tells you everything you need to know about what happened to 5-year-old Kemaya Coleman on the 28th of June, 2021, in a home in the Las Vegas Valley. Kemaya Coleman was 5 years old. She was at an age when children begin to understand the world around them in new and expanding ways, when they ask questions that adults sometimes struggle to answer, when they explore and discover and grow into the people they are becoming. She was at an age when she should have been completely, unconditionally safe in her own home. She was not. On that June day, with temperatures outside already reaching the kind of heat that southern Nevada is known for, Kemaya was placed in a bedroom. The door was locked. The window was closed. There was no ventilation. The home's air conditioning system was not operating. And inside that room, a humidifier had been left running, a device designed to add moisture and warmth to an already sealed, airless space. When investigators and emergency responders eventually gained access to that room, they documented what they found with the clinical precision that their training required. The temperature in the rest of the house was recorded at 95 degrees Fahrenheit. The temperature inside that locked bedroom was significantly higher. For a 5-year-old child, confined in those conditions with no means of escape, no access to water, no relief from the heat, and no adult coming to her aid, the outcome was a tragedy that words struggle to fully capture. Kemaya Coleman did not survive. Kemaya Taylor, the adult responsible for Kemaya's care that day, did not describe what happened as an accident. She did not express the kind of confusion or shock that one might expect from someone who believed they had made a terrible mistake. According to court documents and the statements that became part of the official legal record, Taylor referred to what had happened to Kemaya as a necessary sacrifice. Those two words became the center of gravity around which the entire legal case revolved. Investigators worked methodically to reconstruct the timeline of that day and the days preceding it. They examined the home, the conditions within it, and the circumstances surrounding Kemaya's death with the thoroughness that a case of this nature demands. The Clark County District Attorney's Office reviewed the evidence and made the determination to pursue criminal charges that reflected the severity of what had occurred. The legal proceedings that followed were extensive. Kemaya Taylor's case moved through the Clark County court system over the course of nearly 2 years, a period during which the community of Las Vegas and the broader audience of people who followed the case through local and national news coverage waited for an outcome that would speak to Kemaya's memory. On March 2, 2023, Kemaya Taylor stood in a Clark County courtroom and entered a plea of guilty but mentally ill to the charge of second-degree murder. The guilty but mentally ill designation in Nevada law is a specific legal finding. It acknowledges that a defendant committed the act in question while also recognizing that significant mental health factors were present at the time of the offense. It does not excuse the act. It does not diminish legal responsibility. It does, however, shape the nature of the sentence and the conditions under which that sentence is served. Taylor was sentenced to 10 to 25 years in Nevada State Prison. Under the terms of that sentence, she would be required to receive appropriate mental health treatment during her incarceration, a provision that the Nevada legal system includes specifically for cases involving this type of plea. But the legal designation, the sentence, the mental health provisions, none of it answers the question that lingers at the heart of this case. None of it fully explains how a 5-year-old child came to be locked in a sealed, overheated room while the person responsible for her life stood on the other side of that door. What the case does tell us, what it must tell us, if Kemaya Coleman's story is to carry any meaning beyond the tragedy of her individual suffering, is that the warning signs of a child in danger are not always visible from the outside. They are not always written on a child's face or spoken aloud in a school corridor or detected in a routine welfare check. Sometimes they exist in the private spaces of a home, behind a locked door, in the silence of a neighborhood that had no idea what was happening within its borders. Child welfare advocates who have studied cases like Kemaya's consistently point to the same set of recommendations: regular contact with children by trusted adults outside the immediate household, attentiveness to behavioral changes in young children, and a community culture in which the well-being of every child is treated as a shared responsibility rather than a private matter. Kemaya Coleman was 5 years old. She was old enough to tell someone what was happening if someone had been in a position to ask. The court record is now closed. The sentence has been handed down. But the obligation to remember and to do better does not end with a verdict. If you are worried about a child's safety, please reach out. The Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline is available at 1-800-422-4453, 24 hours a day. Trained counselors are ready to listen and to help connect you with local resources. One call can change everything. Kemaya Coleman deserved to grow up. She deserved a summer that felt like summer, not like the inside of a locked room. Her story is told here so that she is not forgotten, and so that the lesson her tragedy carries is not lost. If this case resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to Cold Case Hour. Your support keeps these stories alive and ensures that voices like Kemaya's continue to be heard. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because every case we bring you matters. Case 3, Jovan Parish Trevino. July 19, 2021, Clark County, Las Vegas. She knew the system. She had worked inside it. She had been trained to recognize the signs of a child in crisis, to document them, to report them, and to connect families with the resources they needed to stay together safely. Jovan Parish Trevino had spent years as a family services worker, a professional whose entire career was built around the protection of children. And on July 19, 2021, in her home in Henderson, Nevada, a city that sits within Clark County, just southeast of the Las Vegas Strip, she took the lives of her 2 children. Christopher was 4 years old. Johanna was 1 year old. The details that emerged in the investigation and subsequent legal proceedings are among the most difficult to process of any case in the history of the Las Vegas Valley. Not only because of the youth of the victims, not only because of the nature of what occurred, but because of the extraordinary irony embedded in Trevino's professional background. Here was a person who had been entrusted by the state of Nevada with the responsibility of protecting children, and who, on a July evening in her own home, failed the 2 children who needed her protection most. Investigators pieced together a timeline from the evidence gathered at the Henderson home and from Trevino's own subsequent statements. Christopher and Johanna Trevino did not survive that night. Their mother, after what investigators determined had occurred, left the home. She drove to Arizona. She crossed state lines and traveled to the city of Bullhead City, where she checked herself into a medical facility. It was there, in that facility, that Jovan Trevino confessed. She told medical staff and subsequently law enforcement what she had done. The confession set in motion a rapid response by Nevada authorities, who worked in coordination with their Arizona counterparts to ensure that the full weight of the investigation could proceed with the information Trevino had provided. The case was returned to Clark County, Nevada, which has jurisdiction over Henderson. The Clark County District Attorney's Office took on the prosecution of a case that was, by any measure, among the most grave that the office had handled. 2 children, a defendant with professional training in child welfare, a deliberate act, a subsequent flight across state lines, and a confession given voluntarily in a medical facility in another state. The legal process that followed was lengthy. Cases of this magnitude, involving multiple victims, complex legal questions about mental state, and the weight of evidence accumulated over years of investigation and court proceedings, do not resolve quickly. The community of Henderson and the broader Las Vegas Valley followed the case as it moved through the court system. Each development reported by local news outlets, including the Las Vegas Review-Journal and the local television stations that serve Clark County. It was not until March of 2026, nearly 5 years after the events of July 19, 2021, that Jovan Trevino stood in a Clark County courtroom and formally admitted to what she had done. She agreed to a sentence of life in Nevada State Prison without the possibility of parole. She would never be released. Christopher and Johanna Trevino, who never had the opportunity to grow up, would be memorialized in a court record that declares, with the full authority of the Nevada justice system, that what happened to them was a crime of the most serious order. The formal sentencing hearing was scheduled for May 12, 2026, a date at which the official legal chapter of this case would close, even as the questions it raises continue to echo through conversations about mental health, about the pressures placed on family services workers, and about the systems that are designed to protect children, but that cannot always protect the children closest to the people working within them. The case of Jovan Trevino raises difficult questions that the child welfare community has grappled with openly in the years since July 2021. How do the professionals who work in some of the most emotionally demanding fields, family services, child protective services, social work, receive the mental health support they need to carry out their responsibilities without being destroyed by the weight of what they witness every day? What happens when the systems designed to protect children fail to protect the children of the workers within those systems? How do we build stronger networks of support not just for the families that child welfare workers serve, but for the workers themselves? These are not questions with simple answers, but they are questions that Christopher and Johanna Trevino's story compels us to ask. A 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, 2 children at the very beginning of their lives, deserve to have their story carry meaning beyond its own tragedy. They deserve to be the reason that conversations happen, that policies are examined, that systems are improved, and that the people charged with protecting the children of this community are themselves protected from the breaking point. Christopher and Johanna Trevino are gone. Their mother will spend the rest of her life in a Nevada state prison. And the community of Henderson, of Clark County, of the greater Las Vegas Valley, carries forward the obligation to remember them and to do the work that their memory demands. Don't look away from cases like this one. These children deserve to be remembered. If this story moved you, please like this video and hit the subscribe button on Cold Case Hour right now. This channel exists to make sure that victims like Christopher and Johanna are never forgotten. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share this with someone who needs to hear these stories. Case 4 Diaja Smith. June 6, 2024, Clark County, Las Vegas. Editor's note: this case involves an active legal proceeding as of April 2026. All individuals referenced are legally presumed innocent until and unless proven guilty in a court of law. The following is based on information from official indictments, law enforcement statements, and verified news reports from the Las Vegas Review-Journal and local television news outlets serving Clark County, Nevada. It was a story that Las Vegas had heard before, and yet it landed with the full force of something impossible to process. A mother reporting her child missing from a public park, a community responding with prayers and searches, and the desperate hope of a child found safe. But the surveillance cameras of Clark County do not lie, and what they captured on June 6, 2024, told a story that no community wants to believe about the people living within it. Diaja Smith told police that her 2-year-old son, Jacoby Robinson Jr., had gone missing from a park in the Las Vegas area. The report triggered the kind of response that missing child cases always do in Clark County. An immediate, coordinated effort by the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department to locate a toddler who could not navigate the world on his own and who needed to be found quickly. Investigators, trained in the careful and thorough examination of every piece of available evidence, turned to the surveillance infrastructure that makes the Las Vegas Valley one of the most monitored urban environments in the United States. What they found on that footage did not show a child wandering away from a distracted parent in a park. What they found showed Diaja Smith pushing a stroller on Lewis Avenue. And what was inside that stroller, investigators determined, was not a living child. According to court documents and law enforcement statements, authorities believe that Jacoby Robinson Jr. had already lost his life before being placed in that stroller. The footage showed Smith pushing the stroller to a dumpster location on Lewis Avenue. The subsequent investigation, involving multiple agencies and extensive forensic work, led to the recovery of the child and the accumulation of evidence that Clark County prosecutors would use to build a case. Diaja Smith was taken into custody. Jacoby Robinson Sr., the child's father, was also subsequently indicted in connection with the case. Both individuals face charges of murder and child abuse under Nevada law. Both are legally presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. As of April 2026, the case remains active within the Clark County court system, with legal proceedings ongoing. Jacoby Robinson Jr. was 2 years old. He is at the center of a case that the Clark County District Attorney's Office has described in terms that reflect the gravity of what the evidence, if proven at trial, would represent. A 2-year-old child, a stroller, a dumpster on Lewis Avenue. The words are stark. The images they create in the mind are unbearable. And the community of Las Vegas has responded to this case the way it has responded to others like it, with grief, with outrage, and with a demand that the legal process deliver the justice that Jacoby Jr. deserves. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, the Clark County District Attorney's Office, and the network of child advocacy organizations that operate throughout southern Nevada have all been involved in various aspects of this case. The investigation was meticulous, the indictments were specific, and the legal proceedings that continue as of the recording of this documentary reflect a system determined to reach a verdict that speaks clearly on behalf of a child who cannot speak for himself. Cases that remain active in the legal system carry a particular kind of weight for communities. There are no final answers yet. There is no sentencing to point to, no chapter closed, no definitive accountability yet rendered. What there is, for the community of Las Vegas and for the viewers of this documentary, is the knowledge that Jacoby Robinson Jr. existed, that he mattered, and that the legal system of Clark County, Nevada, is in the process of determining what justice looks like in his name. 2-year-olds do not have the vocabulary to describe what is happening to them. They do not have the physical ability to leave a dangerous situation. They cannot call for help. They are entirely dependent on the adults in their world. And when those adults fail them, it falls to the rest of the community, to law enforcement, to the courts, and to the journalists and documentary makers who refuse to let these stories be forgotten, to speak for them. Jacoby Robinson Jr. will not be forgotten here. As this case continues to move through the Clark County court system, Cold Case Hour will continue to follow it. The obligation to cover active cases with the same seriousness and respect as closed ones is part of what responsible true crime journalism demands. We will update our audience as significant developments occur. If you are concerned about the safety of a child in your community, please contact the Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline at 1-800-422-4453. You do not need to have all the answers. You only need to make the call. If this case matters to you, and it should, please like this video and subscribe to Cold Case Hour. Every view, every like, every subscription tells YouTube's system that this content deserves to be seen. Help us keep Jacoby's story in front of the people who need to hear it. Subscribe now, hit the bell, and share this video today. Case 5, Cristina Moya. February 25, 2019, Clark County, Las Vegas. There is a particular kind of tragedy in the Clark County court records that involves not only the loss of a child, but the unraveling of a family, the collapse of a household under pressures that, while they cannot excuse what followed, must be understood if any lesson is to be drawn from the devastation left behind. The case of Cristina Moya is one such tragedy. It is a case rooted in a family's disintegration, in the darkness that can descend when mental health crises go unaddressed, and in the irreversible, catastrophic consequences that followed on February 25, 2019. Martin Velasquez was 2 years old. He was at an age of pure discovery, the age of first full sentences, of running on unsteady legs, of the enormous and extraordinary ordinary joy of being alive and small and surrounded by the world. He was Cristina Moya's son, and on February 25, 2019, he did not survive the night. The circumstances that investigators and prosecutors documented in the legal proceedings that followed reveal a household in crisis. Cristina Moya and the father of her son had recently separated. The dissolution of that relationship appears to have been a significant destabilizing factor in Moya's mental and emotional state in the period leading up to February 25. But the legal proceedings and the verdict they produced make clear that whatever personal anguish Moya was experiencing in those days, the decisions she made on that night were decisions for which the state of Nevada held her fully and criminally responsible. According to the evidence presented in Clark County Court, Moya administered medication to Martin in a quantity that far exceeded any safe or appropriate amount for a toddler. The medical evidence was clear, the quantities documented, and the cause of harm to Martin established through the meticulous work of the forensic and medical professionals whose testimony formed the foundation of the prosecution's case. Following what she had done to her son, Moya also inflicted injuries upon herself in what investigators characterized as a murder-suicide attempt. She survived. Martin did not. Law enforcement responded to the scene and the investigation was initiated immediately. The Clark County District Attorney's Office reviewed the evidence and charged Cristina Moya with first-degree murder. The legal proceedings moved with the seriousness that a case of this nature demands. A case involving the deliberate taking of a 2-year-old child's life, framed within the context of a family breakdown and a mental health crisis that the court was required to weigh against the unambiguous facts of what had occurred. On August 7, 2019, Cristina Moya was sentenced in Clark County Court to 20 years to life in Nevada State Prison for the first-degree murder of her son, Martin Velasquez. She will serve a minimum of 20 years before she becomes eligible for parole consideration. Whether she is ever released will be a decision made not by the circumstances of February 25, 2019, but by a parole board that will weigh the totality of who she is and what she has done. Martin Velasquez was 2 years old. He will never be older than 2 years old. He will never know what it feels like to start school, to make his first friend, to grow into a person with his own voice and his own story. His story ended on a February night in Las Vegas because the person responsible for his safety made choices that no parent, regardless of their personal suffering, has the right to make. The case of Cristina Moya is difficult to hold in the mind because it contains within it the simultaneous reality of a child's victimization and a parent's documented mental health crisis. These two realities do not cancel each other out. They exist together, uncomfortably and permanently, in the pages of a Clark County court file. Mental health struggles are real, they are serious, and they devastate families in ways that are not always visible from the outside. But they do not, cannot, serve as a justification for the harm done to Martin Velasquez. What cases like this one tell us, as a community, is that the identification and treatment of mental health crises, particularly in households with young children, must be treated as the public health and child safety priority that it is. When a parent is struggling, the children in that household are at risk. When a family is fracturing, the youngest and most dependent members of that family need someone paying attention. The systems that exist to provide that attention, family services, mental health services, community support networks, must be strengthened, funded, and made accessible to every family in Clark County that needs them. Martin Velasquez deserved a life. He deserved a mother who had the support she needed before February 25th arrived. He deserved to be protected by every system and every community resource that Clark County had available. And his story deserves to be told, not as a sensational headline, but as a serious, sober examination of the gap between the support that at-risk families need and the support they too often receive. If you or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, please reach out to the Crisis Support Services of Nevada at 1-800-273-8255. Help is available. No family should reach a breaking point before the system steps in. If Martin's story affected you, if it made you think about the children in your own community and what they might need, please like this video, subscribe to Cold Case Hour, and share it with the people in your life. These stories save lives when they reach the right person at the right moment. Hit subscribe and help us keep telling them. Case 6. Kristina Kerlus. October 5, 2018, Clark County, Las Vegas. Not every case in the history of the Clark County justice system ends with a verdict of guilt. Not every arrest leads to a conviction. And not every story told within the walls of a Nevada courtroom is a story about the guilt of the accused. Sometimes, and this is among the most important things that a true crime documentary channel can acknowledge, the story is about a system that got it wrong. And the story of Kristina Kerlus is exactly that. On October 5, 2018, Kristina Kerlus's 2-month-old son, Joe Kai, passed away. The death of any infant is a devastating event, a rupture in the natural order of things that no parent is prepared to face and no family fully recovers from. For Kristina Kerlus, the grief of losing her newborn son was compounded almost immediately by something that would define the next 4 years of her life. She became a suspect. The initial medical findings attributed Joe Kai's death to blunt force trauma, or what investigators and medical professionals at the time characterized as shaken baby syndrome. This diagnosis, or more precisely, this cluster of findings, had been used in courts across the United States for decades as the basis for criminal prosecutions in infant death cases. And in Clark County, Nevada, it became the foundation upon which a case against Kristina Kerlus was built. Kerlus was arrested in July of 2019, approximately 9 months after Joe Kai's death. She was charged in connection with his passing. She faced the prospect of criminal conviction, of prison time, of being permanently defined by the legal system as the person responsible for her own child's death. And throughout the entire process, she maintained her innocence. She told investigators, she told her attorneys, she told anyone who would listen, that Joe Kai had natural health issues. That what had happened to her son was not a crime. That the medical interpretation being used against her was wrong. She was right. The intervening years between Kerlus's arrest in 2019 and the resolution of her case in 2022 saw a significant evolution in the medical and scientific community's understanding of shaken baby syndrome and the diagnostic criteria used to identify it. Across the United States and internationally, medical experts, forensic pathologists, pediatric neurologists, biomechanical engineers, began publishing peer-reviewed research that challenged the reliability of certain physical findings that had long been used as definitive indicators of inflicted trauma in infants. In Joe Kai's case, that evolving science became the cornerstone of a re-examination. Medical experts, brought in to review the original findings with the benefit of updated scientific understanding, determined that Joe Kai had not died as the result of inflicted harm. He had died, the experts concluded, from complications related to sickle cell trait, a genetic condition, a natural cause, something that had nothing to do with anything his mother had done. In December of 2022, the Clark County District Attorney's Office dismissed all charges against Kristina Kerlus. After more than 3 years of living under the shadow of a criminal accusation, 3 years of grief compounded by the weight of being labeled a suspect in her own child's death, Kristina Kerlus was exonerated. The charges were gone. The case was closed. And the system that had arrested her, charged her, and carried a prosecution against her for years was forced to reckon with the reality of what had happened. But exoneration, as anyone who has followed wrongful conviction cases knows, is not the end of the story. It is, in many ways, the beginning of a different and equally difficult chapter. The years spent under criminal accusation cannot be returned. The grief of losing Joe Kai, grief that should have been the only burden Kerlus carried, had been layered under years of legal proceedings, public scrutiny, and the particular kind of pain that comes from being accused of harming the child you loved and lost. In December of 2024, Cristina Kerlus filed a lawsuit for wrongful prosecution. The lawsuit represents her effort to hold accountable the system that arrested and charged her based on medical evidence that has since been scientifically discredited. The lawsuit was active as of the recording of this documentary. The case of Cristina Kerlus matters for reasons that extend far beyond her individual experience. It is a case that speaks directly to the ongoing national conversation about the reliability of certain forensic and medical diagnostic tools when used as the basis for criminal prosecution. It speaks to the importance of ensuring that defendants in cases involving complex medical evidence have access to expert witnesses who can challenge the prosecution's interpretation of that evidence. And it speaks to the responsibility of the legal system to revisit cases, at any stage, when new science or new information calls an original conclusion into question. Cristina Kerlus was a mother who lost her infant son. She then spent years being treated by the legal system as if she had been responsible for that loss. The medical community's evolution on the science of infant death diagnosis gave her what the original investigation had not, the truth. And the truth, in this case, set her free. Jovan Kerlus was 2 months old. He was too young to have a story in the conventional sense, too young to have walked or talked, or made the kind of memories that survive a person's absence. But his name now stands at the center of a case that has informed how law enforcement, prosecutors, and courts in Nevada approach infant death investigations. His legacy, shaped by his mother's refusal to accept a false verdict, is a contribution to justice that he could never have made himself. The lesson of this case is not that the legal system always gets it right. It is that truth, pursued with determination, can ultimately prevail, even when it takes years. And that the people who are wrongly accused deserve the same commitment to accuracy and accountability that those who are rightly convicted receive. This is one of the most important cases in Cold Case Hour's history, a story not of guilt, but of perseverance and truth. If it made you think, if it reminded you that justice is a process and not just an outcome, please like this video and subscribe to Cold Case Hour. We cover every kind of case, the convictions and the exonerations, because both matter. Hit subscribe, ring the bell, and help this channel grow. Case 7, Christiann Ault. 2022 through March 2024, Clark County, Las Vegas. Editor's note: Christiann Ault has pleaded not guilty to all charges. She is legally presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. The following is based entirely on verified court documents, official indictment records, and reporting by the Las Vegas Review-Journal and local news outlets covering Clark County, Nevada. No details of the alleged conduct are described beyond what is necessary to convey the legal nature of the charges and their impact on the community. In the digital landscape of modern parenting, community Facebook groups have become a significant part of how many parents, particularly mothers, connect, share resources, ask for advice, and build networks of support in their local communities. In the Las Vegas Valley, one such group had amassed a substantial following of local parents who used it as a trusted space for exactly those purposes. The group was called Las Vegas Supermoms. Its founder was Christiann Ault. By all outward appearances, Ault was precisely the kind of community-minded, engaged local parent that a group like Las Vegas Supermoms was designed to celebrate. She had built a platform. She had cultivated trust. She was a visible, known figure within a community of parents who had chosen to place their confidence in the space she had created. In July of 2025, that image shattered completely. Christiann Ault was indicted by a Clark County grand jury on charges of lewdness with a minor and child abuse. The indictment covered an alleged period of conduct spanning from 2022 through March of 2024. During the subsequent legal proceedings, a minor provided testimony alleging that the conduct described in the indictment had occurred on a regular basis over that 2-year period. The indictment, the grand jury process, and the testimony that formed part of the legal proceedings were reported by the Las Vegas Review-Journal and other local Clark County news outlets that cover the Nevada court system. Christiann Ault pleaded not guilty to all charges. Her legal representation has maintained that position throughout the proceedings. A jury trial was scheduled to begin on April 6, 2026, in Clark County. A proceeding that would place the evidence before a jury of her peers and allow the legal process to determine, through the full evidentiary weight of both prosecution and defense, what the facts of this case ultimately establish. The case raises significant questions about the nature of community trust in digital spaces, about the responsibility that comes with building a platform, however informal, that is specifically designed to serve families and children. The Las Vegas Supermoms Facebook group was a resource for parents navigating the challenges of raising children in a large urban community. That the founder of that group faces the charges described in the indictment is a development that has prompted serious reflection within the parent community of Clark County. Child safety advocates and legal experts who have commented on cases of this type, cases involving alleged conduct by individuals in positions of community trust, consistently emphasize the same core message, that the outward presentation of trustworthiness, community engagement, and parental identity is not, by itself, a reliable indicator of a person's conduct in private. The careful, deliberate cultivation of a public-facing identity as a community leader or trusted resource can coexist, as alleged in this indictment, with conduct that directly contradicts everything that identity appears to represent. As of the recording of this documentary, the jury trial proceedings in the case of Christiann Ault were either underway or recently concluded, depending on the timeline of events following the scheduled April 6, 2026 start date. Cold Case Hour will follow the outcome of this trial and report the verdict to our audience when it is available. What is certain, regardless of the trial's outcome, is that this case has prompted the Clark County community to examine the spaces, digital and physical, in which parents and children interact, and to ask harder questions about the vetting, accountability, and oversight that those spaces require. Children deserve to be safe, everywhere. And the community of Las Vegas deserves platforms and spaces built by people who honor that principle in every aspect of their conduct. We will update this case as it develops. If this story raised concerns for you about child safety in your community, please visit the Nevada Child Abuse and Neglect Hotline at 1-800-992-5576. You can also contact local Clark County resources through the Department of Family Services. Please like this video and subscribe to Cold Case Hour. This case is ongoing, and your subscription ensures you'll be among the first to know when we update it. Hit subscribe, hit the bell, and share this video. These are the stories that communities need to have. Case 8, Philena Dees. May 1st, 2023, Clark County, Las Vegas. When the call came in on May 1st, 2023, what law enforcement officers found when they arrived at the Las Vegas area home of Philena Dees was a scene that, by the accounts of the investigators and first responders who documented it, was deeply troubling on multiple levels. It was not a single tragedy they encountered that day. It was a layered picture of prolonged neglect that told the story of a household in which 2 children had been living in conditions that no child in Clark County, or anywhere in the United States, should ever have to endure. The first and most immediate finding was the death of Aurelius Dees. He was 1 year old. What the medical examiner and investigators documented in terms of Aurelius's physical condition at the time of his discovery reflected not a sudden, acute event, but rather the consequences of extended deprivation and neglect. The home had no power. The home had no running water. These are not abstract deficiencies. They represent the most basic infrastructure of a livable environment, stripped away from a household where a 1-year-old infant and an 8-year-old child were depending on an adult to provide them. The second finding compounded the first in a way that required investigators to open an entirely separate line of inquiry within the same case. Philena Dees' 8-year-old daughter had been confined to a room within the home for a period of time that investigators determined exceeded 1 year. The reason offered for this confinement, according to court documents and reporting by local Las Vegas news outlets, was connected to an alleged assault on the child by Dees' boyfriend, a detail that, when placed alongside the broader picture of conditions in that home, painted a portrait of a household in which children were profoundly unsafe and in which the decisions made by the adult responsible for their care had, over an extended period, caused serious harm to both of them. The Clark County Department of Family Services, the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, and the Clark County District Attorney's Office all became involved in the investigation and subsequent legal proceedings. Philena Dees was indicted in June of 2023 on 7 counts of child abuse and neglect, a charge list that reflects the multiple dimensions of what investigators documented in that home on May 1st. As of April 2026, Dees remains in custody in Clark County as her case continues to move through the court system. The legal proceedings are ongoing. The case of Philena Dees is one that forces a community to examine the intersection of multiple systemic failures: housing instability, domestic safety concerns, access to support services, and the monitoring of at-risk households. These are not simple issues. They are woven into the complex fabric of urban poverty and resource scarcity that affects communities throughout the Las Vegas Valley. And they are issues that, when they intersect in a single household where young children are present and dependent, can produce outcomes of the most devastating kind. Aurelius Dees was 1 year old. He never had the opportunity to develop into the person he might have been. His 8-year-old sister survived, but the experience of being confined to a room for more than a year, of living without power or running water, of existing in conditions that no child should ever face, will carry consequences that extend far beyond the legal resolution of this case. Child welfare professionals who have examined the broader context of cases like this one consistently point to the importance of robust, well-funded community support systems, systems that can reach families in crisis before the crisis reaches its most catastrophic conclusion. Regular wellness visits, support networks for isolated households, community partnerships between schools, healthcare providers, and family services agencies that allow the early identification of households where children may be at risk. Aurelius deserved to grow up. His sister deserved a safe home. And the community of Clark County carries the obligation to ensure that the resources necessary to prevent the next case like this one, before it becomes a case at all, are available, accessible, and actively deployed. If you know of a child who may be in an unsafe living situation, please contact the Nevada Child Abuse and Neglect Hotline at 1-800-992-5576. You do not need to be certain. You only need to be willing to make the call. If the story of Aurelius and his sister moved you, please like this video and subscribe to Cold Case Hour. This is the kind of case that rarely gets the national attention it deserves, but it matters, and the children involved deserve to be remembered. Hit subscribe, ring the notification bell, and share this story. Case 9. Samantha Moreno Rodriguez. May 28, 2021, Clark County, Las Vegas. Of all the cases examined in this documentary, the case of Samantha Moreno Rodriguez and the death of her 7-year-old son, Liam Husted, is the one that received the widest national and international attention. It is a case that was covered by CNN, NBC News, the Associated Press, and news outlets in multiple countries. A case that became, in the summer of 2021, a story that transcended the borders of Clark County and entered the broader national conversation about child safety, about the relationship between divorced or separated parents, and about what happens when the warning signs that a child is in danger go undetected until it is too late. Liam Husted was 7 years old. He lived with his father, Nick Husted, in the San Jose, California area. His mother, Samantha Moreno Rodriguez, was also a part of his life. A presence that, from the outside, appeared to represent the kind of shared parenting arrangement that courts and child welfare professionals consider preferable in cases where separated parents are both willing and able to be involved in their child's upbringing. In late May of 2021, Liam was in the Las Vegas area, spending time with his mother. On May 28, 2021, a date that would be entered permanently into the records of Clark County, Nevada, Liam Husted's life came to an end. He was 7 years old. His body was discovered near a hiking trail outside of Las Vegas. He was found unclothed, in a remote location, by hikers who had no idea what they had encountered until law enforcement arrived, and the full gravity of the discovery became clear. For days, Liam Husted was known to the public as an unidentified child. His father, Nick Husted, who had not heard from Liam and had been unable to reach his son's mother, had filed a missing persons report. The pieces did not immediately connect: the unidentified child near the hiking trail in Clark County, and the missing child reported in California, because the geography separated them, and because the speed of the identification process had not yet caught up with the speed of events. When the identification was made, when it became clear that the child found near that Las Vegas hiking trail was Liam Husted, the investigation shifted from a missing child case into a full homicide investigation. And at the center of that investigation was Liam's mother, Samantha Moreno Rodriguez. By the time investigators connected the dots, Rodriguez had already fled. She had left the Las Vegas area and traveled to Colorado. It was there, on June 8, 2021, 11 days after Liam's death, that she was located and taken into custody by Colorado law enforcement, working in coordination with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department and federal authorities. She was extradited to Nevada and returned to Clark County to face prosecution. The case that followed was thorough, carefully constructed, and ultimately definitive. The evidence gathered by investigators, forensic evidence, digital evidence, evidence from the location where Liam's body was found, and evidence gathered in Colorado, built a case that left no room for ambiguity about what had happened and who was responsible. Samantha Moreno Rodriguez entered a guilty plea. In November of 2022, she was sentenced in Clark County Court to 20 years to life in Nevada State Prison. She will serve a minimum of 20 years before she is eligible for any parole consideration. The sentencing judge's words that day reflected the community's grief and its demand for accountability, not abstract legal accountability, but the human accountability owed to a 7-year-old boy who had gone to spend time with his mother and had not come home. Nick Husted, Liam's father, has spoken publicly about his son since the resolution of the case. He has described a child full of life and curiosity, a boy who loved the things that 7-year-old boys love, who had a whole world of experience ahead of him, and who deserved to grow up and live it. Nick Husted's public advocacy in Liam's name has become a part of the case's legacy. A father's grief transformed into a commitment to ensuring that his son's name continues to be spoken, that his story continues to be told, and that the lessons of what happened to him contribute to the protection of other children. The case of Liam Husted has been cited by child welfare advocates in discussions about custody arrangements and the monitoring of parental contact in cases involving children of separated parents. It has raised questions about the information sharing protocols between states when a child in one jurisdiction is spending time in another, and it has reinforced the argument, made consistently by child safety professionals, that the warning signs preceding a child's death are often visible in retrospect, and that the systems designed to catch those signs before they become tragedies must be continuously evaluated and strengthened. Liam Husted was 7 years old. He loved life. He had a father who loved him. He had a childhood stretching out in front of him. And on a May day in 2021, all of it was taken away in the desert outside Las Vegas. He will not be forgotten here. His story will continue to be told, by his father, by the journalists who covered this case, by the documentarians who refused to let his name fade from public memory, and by the viewers of Cold Case Hour who understand that remembering the victims is the first and most essential act of honoring them. Justice was served in a Clark County courtroom in November of 2022. Liam Husted deserved that justice, and he deserved so much more. This case is one of the most important stories Cold Case Hour has ever told. If it affected you, if Liam's story stayed with you the way it has stayed with everyone who has heard it, please like this video and subscribe to Cold Case Hour right now. Your subscription is how this channel keeps telling stories like Liam's. Hit the subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Liam's story deserves every viewer we can reach. Case 10, Tattiyona Wilson. September 11th, 2020, Clark County, Las Vegas. The final case in this documentary is one that does not fit neatly into the categories that true crime audiences are accustomed to. It is not a case of clear-cut guilt followed by a lengthy prison sentence. It is not a case of exoneration following the discovery of new evidence. It is, instead, a case that sits at the complicated intersection of tragedy, legal uncertainty, and the difficult questions that arise when the facts of a child's death are genuinely contested, and when the legal system must determine, within the bounds of the evidence available, what level of responsibility can and should be assigned to the adults in a child's life. On September 11th, 2020, a 2-month-old infant boy in the care of his mother, Tattiyona Wilson, in the Las Vegas area, suffered injuries that no infant should ever sustain. The child did not survive. He was 2 months old. The medical findings documented multiple skull fractures. In any case involving an infant with injuries of this type, law enforcement and the Clark County District Attorney's Office have a legal and ethical obligation to conduct a thorough investigation into the circumstances that produced those injuries, because 2-month-old infants do not sustain skull fractures accidentally in the ordinary course of their daily lives. The investigation that followed was exactly that: thorough, careful, and attentive to every piece of available evidence. Tattiyona Wilson was charged. The case moved through the Clark County court system over the course of several years, a timeline that reflects the complexity of the legal and evidentiary questions involved, and the seriousness with which the court system approached the task of determining what had actually happened on September 11, 2020, and in whose hands the responsibility for the child's death ultimately lay. What made this case legally complicated, and what ultimately shaped its outcome in a way that distinguishes it from many of the other cases examined in this documentary, was evidence introduced during the proceedings that raised the possibility that another child present in the home may have been responsible for the fatal injuries. This evidence was presented by the defense and was evaluated by the court within the full context of all other available evidence and testimony. The court's response to the totality of that evidence was reflected in the outcome. In January of 2024, the charges against Tattiyona Wilson were reduced from the most serious original charge to child abuse, specifically in the category of failure to protect. She was sentenced to probation. The failure to protect legal standard is a significant and often debated one in child welfare law. It holds that a parent or caregiver who does not directly cause harm to a child, but who fails to take reasonable steps to protect that child from harm, whether from another person or from dangerous circumstances, bears legal responsibility for the consequences of that failure. In Nevada, as in many states, this standard applies even when the person accused did not directly inflict the injury that caused the child's death or serious harm. In Wilson's case, the court determined that while the direct causation of the infant's fatal injuries could not be established beyond the legal standard required for the most serious charge, Wilson bore responsibility for the failure to protect her infant son from the circumstances and from the individuals present in that home. The sentence of probation, as opposed to incarceration, reflects the court's weighing of the specific facts, the evidentiary complexities, and the legal standards applicable to the charge as reduced. It is an outcome that will be viewed differently by different members of the public, depending on their perspective on the evidence and their understanding of the legal framework within which the court was operating. What is not in question, what cannot be in question, is that a 2-month-old infant lost his life. He was 8 weeks old. He had been in the world for less than the span of a season. He deserved to be protected by every adult in his environment, absolutely and without exception. He deserved the kind of safety that is the birthright of every child. The certainty that the people responsible for him would keep him from harm, regardless of what else was happening in that household, regardless of who else was present, regardless of any complication or difficulty that the adults around him were navigating. He did not receive that protection, and the Clark County court system, working within the boundaries of the evidence before it, delivered the verdict and sentence that it determined the law required. Cases like Tattiyona Wilson's are uncomfortable precisely because they resist simple conclusions. They ask more of us than the straightforward narrative of crime and punishment that most true crime audiences expect. They ask us to sit with ambiguity, to understand that the legal system's determinations are products of evidence, standards of proof, and legal frameworks that do not always produce the emotionally satisfying outcome that a child's death seems to demand. But even in cases where the legal outcome is complex, the child at the center of it is not. He was 2 months old. He was completely vulnerable. He needed the adults in his world to be exactly what parents are supposed to be, a wall between their child and anything that could cause that child harm. The lesson of this case, the last and perhaps the most nuanced lesson in this documentary, is that protecting children is not a passive obligation. It is not enough to refrain from causing harm directly. The legal standard that produced Tattiyona Wilson's conviction on a charge of failure to protect enshrines in Nevada law a principle that is, at its core, a moral one. That every adult responsible for a child has an affirmative, active, unceasing duty to ensure that child is safe. not just from the adult's own actions, but from everything that the adult's choices, circumstances, and decisions bring into the child's world. Every child in Clark County, in Las Vegas, in Henderson, in every neighborhood of this valley, deserves that level of protection. Every adult who has a child in their care carries that responsibility. And every member of this community carries the shared obligation to pay attention, to speak up, and to be the voice for children who cannot yet speak for themselves. If you are concerned about a child's safety, please contact the Nevada Child Abuse and Neglect Hotline at 1-800-992-5576. You can also reach the Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline at 1-800-422-4453. These lines are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and every call is taken seriously. And if you have stayed with Cold Case Hour through all 10 of these cases, through 10 stories of children whose lives were shaped, disrupted, or ended by the decisions of the adults responsible for them, then you understand why this channel exists. These cases are told not to shock, not to sensationalize, and not to exploit the grief of families who have already suffered enough. They are told because these children deserve to be remembered, because these communities deserve to understand what happened within them, because the justice system's work deserves to be witnessed by the public it serves, and because the only way to honor the lives of the children at the center of these stories is to ensure that those stories are heard, understood, and taken seriously. Thank you for watching Cold Case Hour. If this full documentary moved you, if even one of these 10 cases made you think differently about child safety, about the legal system, or about the community you live in, please like this video right now. Subscribe to Cold Case Hour if you haven't already. Share this documentary with someone in your life who you think should see it. Ring the notification bell so you never miss a new episode.